I'm just going to get right into this, but I do want to introduce myself. My name is Michelle McCumber, and I have a website, Deception Bites, and that's also my channel. But I've also written a book called The View Beneath, and it's about dominionism. And if you don't know what dominionism is, you really should learn, because I don't know how many of you have really been following this person that is posting on 4chan, the forum. They're posting in the forum politically incorrect, and they go by the name of Q, or Q-Anon. It's very strange how I even came across this, because I was listening to something else while I was getting ready a few days ago, and I was just listening to it in the background, and it happened to be on YouTube. Well, as you well know, on YouTube, when one video ends, the next one just in the line just starts playing. So that's what happened, and suddenly I thought, what am I listening to? And I came and sat down and really listened to what this person was saying. And they were talking about Q and the things that had been posted. Well, immediately I dropped what I was doing that day, and I started really researching, because I am like a dog with a bone. I eat this stuff up. But it's interesting, because the more that I'm getting into it, the more I'm seeing parallels and making some connections that to me are evident, but to others I don't think it would be at all. My life has been sort of a journey, and I would say I've had the privilege of being, but none of these places ever felt like a privilege. But I've been in places to see things that I didn't know what they meant at the time. But years later, I remember when I was in Louisiana, I felt like that was it, that the pieces of the puzzle were all gonna fall into place while I lived there, and indeed they did. And I was able to connect a lot of things, and it overwhelmed me when I thought, wow, like if I hadn't have been in this place, I wouldn't have gotten this piece of information that unlocked this. And if I hadn't been here and seen this and heard this, and it all of a sudden everything flew together, and I saw this huge picture that scared me. Because I realized I just made, well, it's hard for me, and I ask that you would forgive me, because I want to tell you everything, and I have to do that in order. I think the best way to do that is to just start with what has been posted in the forum by Q. What I have done is I have put it into a Word document, and then I have made my own comments. Anything in red are my comments, and of course my in-depth comments are on the side. So I have gone through this in depth, and I'm hoping that as I go through this and I get deeper into this, you're going to make some connections. Do I believe that this person is Donald Trump? Well, that's the conclusion that a lot of people are jumping to. And at first, that whole idea seemed absolutely ridiculous to me. And I read through all the posts myself. After listening to this person on YouTube, I read through it all myself. And then I read through them again. And then I started going through in depth. And yes, I'm convinced that if it's not Donald Trump, that it's somebody very close to him, because of the information and the fact that this person knows things in advance of them happening. For instance, they knew that John Podesta would be indicted on November 3rd. And who would know that? Who would know that information? If this was somebody just LARPing, then they wouldn't know that information. So it's definitely somebody that's at a high level. And Q stands for Q clearance. And I guess that is the top secret clearance. And as well, it's interesting because I had a friend call me tonight, and she said, do you know who the Q are? And I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, she's a Star Trek fan, and she told me that on Star Trek, and I can't verify that because I probably watched only little pieces of the program. I've never actually watched a whole episode of Star Trek. But the Q are people that are, highly advanced. And I don't know what else. I need to read what she sent me. But anyway, I'm going to start with this because I don't want to be here all night, and I'm sure you don't either. So I am just recording my screen, and just so you'll know who you are talking to, this is me. I'm not going to go on webcam because it's distracting to people, because then you'll focus on me and and whether or not you like my hair and whether whatever, and instead of focusing on what I'm saying and focusing on what you're reading. So that's why I'm not doing webcam. I'm just not into that. But let's start at the very first post that he made, and the very first post that he made was on October 31st. And this is it. Now, he starts with this, and anything you see in black are his words. Again, this was posted on 4chan, Politically Correct Forum. He starts with SCI and then F in brackets. Now, SCI means secret compartmentalized information. That's what he means by that. And then he says MI. MI stands for military intelligence. Then he asks, what is state secrets? And how are they upheld in the Supreme Court? That should be in red because he did not spell out Supreme Court. So I don't want to confuse anyone or suggest that those are his words. But anyway, he put, what is state secrets and how are they upheld in the Supreme Court? Well, the state privilege, or the state secret privilege, or SSP, is a common law privilege that allows the head of an executive department to refuse to produce evidence in a court case on the grounds that the evidence is secret information that would harm national security or foreign relation interests if disclosed. But if you really get into that and start looking at it, which I did, they really are claiming state secret when something, but they don't have to produce any proof that it's a state secret. So I found that kind of interesting. I didn't realize that. What must be completed to engage military intelligence over other three-letter agencies, which is the FBI, CIA, and NSA? I'm not exactly sure, to tell you the truth. What must occur to allow for civilian trials? I'm not sure. Why is this relevant? Well, I'm sure it is relevant, but I don't exactly know what the law would be there. I have looked into some of this stuff on here in depth, and some of it I haven't, because it would be overwhelming. And as we go along, you'll see why. And then Q asks, what was Flynn's background? And I put BBC because that's where I got the information from. That should be in red too. But he basically was a foreign agent. He's a spy. And here, Michael Flynn's short tenure as Donald Trump's national security advisor ended in controversy when he resigned over contacts he had made with Russia before Mr. Trump took office. After just 23 days on the job, Mr. Flynn was forced out over revelations that he had discussed lifting U.S. sanctions on Russia with their ambassador to Washington, and that he lied to the U.S. Vice President about that conversation. Since his departure, revelations have kept coming. Since Mr. Flynn left the White House, the Pentagon has launched an investigation into whether he failed to disclose payments from Russia and Turkish lobbyists that he was given for speeches and consulting work. In March, he registered with the U.S. government as a foreign agent due to his work for the Turkish government. So that's Flynn's background, and that is, he was Donald Trump's national security advisor. Why is this relevant? Well, I think we'll find out as we go along. But I don't know yet. Why did ADMR, now I think I was the one that put the NSA there because I looked up in all the agencies, and the only person that I could find that would match that would be Admiral Michael S. Rogers, and he is the head of the NSA. And as it goes on, it becomes plainer that that is indeed who it is. Does POTUS, and POTUS obviously President of the United States, does POTUS know where the bodies are buried? Well, I think by even asking that question that this person is intimating that he does. Does POTUS have the goods on most bad actors? Again, I think by posting this, he's intimating that he does. Was Trump asked to run for president? Again, I think this is, I really don't think that he would post that question if it were not a fact, that he was, in fact, asked to run for president. Why? Well, that remains to be seen. By who? Don't know. Some of these things become clearer as we go along. Was HRC next in line? And HRC is Hillary Rodham Clinton. And yes, I believe she was. I believe that everyone believed that Hillary Rodham Clinton was going to get in. And perhaps even Donald was asked to run because they felt that there was absolutely no way he would ever get in. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Was the election supposed to be rigged? Personally, and I know people accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist, but I do look at the whole picture and read and study this stuff. And yes, I believe that most elections are rigged to some extent. So I think, again, by him asking this question, it's a little obvious that he thinks the election was supposed to be rigged. Did good people prevent the rigging? I would say yes, but not entirely. And again, good people, it's going to become clearer. It's going to become, as we go along, I would ask that we'd really look at who they're calling good and who they're calling evil, because that makes me feel very uncomfortable. When something is posited as a holy war, I think we need to be alarmed. I think we need to be very, very alarmed. But again, we're going to see this as we go along, because you will be convinced that whoever this Q is, they know what they're talking about. They're on the inside. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to make some connections as well, and see why I'm very concerned. Why did POTUS form a panel to investigate? And he did. It's called the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity. And I assume because Trump is aware of voter fraud, the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity, also called the Voter Fraud Commission, is a temporary commission established in May 2017 by the United States President Donald Trump's Executive Order 13799 on May 11th, 2017. The Trump administration has said the commission would review claims of voter fraud, improper registration, and voter suppression. The establishment of the commission followed through on previous unsubstantiated claims by Trump that millions of illegal immigrants had voted in the 2016 United States presidential election. And it says Mike Pence serves as chair of the commission, with the Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach serving as vice chair. Now, here's something interesting. I am a legal resident of the U.S. I am a Canadian citizen, so I have a green card, and meaning that I am a legal alien. And it's interesting because I know I can walk into any voter booth and vote, even though it says expressly that I do not have that right to vote. But I happen to know for a fact because I got sick of constantly telling them not to register me to vote because I couldn't. Well, that's because I'm honest. But How many other people are there that are there legally or illegally, that are voting, who are not supposed to have that privilege of voting? And I can guarantee you, because they do not check, and I know that as a fact because I'm a legal alien. I was about to say I'm an illegal alien. No, I have a green card and I'm there legally, but yeah, it's not checked. So I do think that it needs to be looked into. I do think that there's voter fraud. There's been cases of dead people voting, which is an amazing feat, and just other such things. So I think that it's a good thing that this has been formed. No question about that. Okay, now let me not skip ahead too quickly here. Okay, so did good people prevent the rigging? Maybe. Has POTUS ever made a statement that did not become proven as true or fact? Not to my knowledge, but that doesn't mean, I think that by writing this, that Q is saying that he hasn't, but I find that a little hard to believe, personally. But sorry for the clanking of my glass, my cold coffee. Why did he form a panel to investigate? Because he's aware of voter fraud. And I think that most Americans, well, maybe not most, but a good portion of Americans are aware of voter fraud. What is POTUS in control of? I said military. What is the one organization left that isn't corrupt? And I said military. And I think it's going to become clear later on that those are the correct answers. Why does the military play such a vital role? And again, by the very fact that he's saying, what is POTUS in control of? Military. What is the one organization left that isn't corrupt? Military. And then he says, why does the military play such a vital role? So he's already giving us the answer, essentially. And I said, because what they're calling for is a military coup. And again, that's going to become very obvious to you. Why is POTUS surrounded by highly respected generals? Because they're crucial to his plans, and because he trusts them. I mean, that's obvious. There would be no other reason to do it if they weren't part of his plans and that he trusted them. Who guards former presidents? Secret Service, that's a fact. Why is that relevant? Well, I think he's going to tell us why it's relevant. Gosh, I hate it when it does that. Hang on here, sorry. Okay, why is that relevant? Who guards Hillary Rodham Clinton? Well, Secret Service. Why is Antifa allowed to operate? They're needed by the left, and that's what this person is going to claim later up. And I've got the privilege of having read it all and kind of synthesized it all. So that is the answer that I put there. And then Q asks, why hasn't the Muslim Brotherhood been classified as a terrorist organization? And over here I put a note that, come on. Okay. Members of the Trump administration have pushed to designate the Muslim Brotherhood the world's oldest and largest Islamic movement, a foreign terrorist organization. So he's asking, why hasn't the Muslim Brotherhood been classified as a terrorist organization? What happens if Soros-funded operations get violent and engage in domestic terrorism? Well, that's a good question. Is Soros funding domestic terrorism? Is that what he's hinting at? Is he hinting that the military would be needed in such a case? I don't quite know, but I think both of those answers are applicable. What happens if mayors, police, commissioners, and chiefs do not enforce the law? Well, that's obvious. The military steps in. If our elected officials and our policemen and our mayors and our police commissioners and everyone else refuses to enforce what is the law, the military would step in. That's a fact. What authority does POTUS have specifically over the Marines? Well, interestingly enough, when I looked this up, I found that the president does not need congressional approval to deploy the Marines, and that shocked me because I thought, deploying military for any reason needed congressional approval, but apparently not. And as we discover later on, it's worse than that, because the law has been amended to permit the military to be employed domestically to quell violence, to civil unrest, all sorts of things. But who defines? They call that insurrection. But who defines that? Does that mean that if you're protesting something which is your legal right to do, your free speech, if you're protesting something that the official government in charge at that time doesn't approve of, they can send the military in to shut it down? I would say yes. What authority does POTUS have specifically over the Marines? We just went over that. Why is this important? It's important because he'd never get congressional approval to deploy them. He would never get approval from Congress to use the military, and I think that we all know that that's a fact. What is Mueller's background? And then he says military. So he's not just looking for Mueller's background, he's looking for his military background. And his military background is the Marine Corps. He's the former FBI director. But that's not what he's looking for here, because he specifically, pointed out the military. So it's the Marine Corps. And then I put something down here, I guess. Former director of the FBI, a Republican. He was appointed by President George W. Bush, and his original 10-year term was given a 2-year extension by President Barack Obama, making him the longest-serving FBI director since J. Edgar Hoover. He is currently head of the Special Counsel investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 United States elections, and that's important. Was Trump asked to run for president with assurance made to prevent tampering? Now, again, I think these questions are not really questions. I think they're rhetorical. I really do. I don't think that he's asking us these questions, but he's actually telling us what he wants the answer to be. So I would say yes. How is POTUS always 5 steps ahead? Well, I think it's obvious that if somebody's always ahead in that manner, that he's getting intel from somewhere. And I put Mueller. I don't know. Who is helping POTUS? Mueller? I don't know who's helping POTUS at this point. There could be several. But he is getting inside intel from somewhere. So I think that's it for that particular post. So we'll go on to the next one, which is posted the same night on October 31st. And these get increasingly more interesting as we go along. So I hope that you'll hang on with me and allow me to go through this. I'm going to break it into sections because it's overwhelming, and not everybody has the stamina or the ability to, in free time, to sit down and listen to 3 hours of somebody talking. So I'm going to break it up, but just hang with me for a while because there's some interesting stuff coming, and it's very, very important. So October 31st at 11 p.m., Q posts, there are more good people than bad. The wizard and warlocks inside term will not allow another satanic, and forgive my language because I really don't use foul language, but I think POS stands for piece of shit. That's what I think. Control our country. Realize Soros, Clinton, Obama, Putin, etc. are all controlled by 3 families. The 4th was removed post-Trump's victory. Now, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds are definitely two of those families. There's no question in my mind. The third could be either Morgan or DuPont, also top level families, and the Bush family. They're up there as well, but I think that what he is alluding to is that the fourth, Bush, was removed when Trump took office. So now here, notice that this is posted October 31st. Yet he's saying 11.3 Podesta indicted, 11.6 Huma indicted. Well, that will turn out to be true. And I ask you, how would he have known? How would this person have possibly known? And the dates that they would get their indictments? Like, how would he possibly know that if he was not part of the inside? There's no way. So, and what else did I want to say here? I think this use of wizard and warlocks is interesting because he's putting these wizards and warlocks, and it comes up again in a post further on, and it seems to me that he's painting the wizards and warlocks in a positive light, whereas normally as a Christian I would look at wizards and warlocks and I would assume that's negative. And I still do assume that those terms are negative, but this person, Q, is saying this in a positive light. The wizards and the warlocks are not going to allow another satanic POS to control our country. Realize Soros, Clinton's, Obama, Putin, etc. are all controlled by three families. The fourth was removed post-Trump's victory. Now, there's a lot of us that have been saying this for a long time, that there's certain families that rule the world, and there really are. And you look at the influence and the money, and it's just evident. It's evident that they have not just significant power, but I mean, they've amassed so much power that they are able to control governments and control, be the puppet masters and pull the strings at the very high level. So anyway, let's go on to the next part. Q says Manafort was placed into Trump's camp as well as others. Now, obviously, when he says he was placed there, he means that he was a plant. Somebody put him there. And then he says, the corruption that will come out is so serious that deals must be cut for people to walk away. Otherwise, 70% of elected politicians would be in jail. You are seeing it already begin. A deep cleaning is occurring, and the prevention and defense of pure evil is occurring on a daily basis. They never thought they were going to lose control of the presidency, not just Democrats, and thought they had control since making past mistakes. Parentheses, JFK, Reagan. Good speed, patriots. P.S. Soros is targeted. And obviously that means for takedown. Now, I put a little note over here because I get very nervous when I see people using, it is evil. The things that some of the government is, I draw your attention to the worldwide pedophile networks and human trafficking and all these things, which we see, which we're going to see is very much tied to people in our government. And that's well and good. Yes, that's evil. It's evil. But when there's such a thing as doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, and that's what I'm getting at. This sounds wonderful, and to tell you the truth, when I first heard it, I got really excited. It was only until I started getting further along in his posts that something got all over me. It was making me very nervous because it reminded me of the Dominionists. It reminded me of their plan to take over. It reminded me of all this rhetoric I've been hearing my whole life because I was in that movement and came out of that movement. And I'm aware of what their plans are. It also reminded me a lot of the rhetoric that Hitler used to gain power, and it made me very nervous. It really did. So I put not just the Democrats. I mean, it's not just the Democrats that are evil. And if we think that, we are really, really deceived. The Republicans have had their own scandals, call boys at the White House and the Franklin cover-up. So you can Google this, call boys at the White House, and you can see that this was a fact. I think it was reported in the Washington Post. And the Franklin cover-up, I mean, oh my gosh, that's a very deep rabbit hole right there. And so they've had their own scandals. There's as much corruption in the Republican Party as there is in the Democratic Party. It just so happens that, you know, Trump is a Republican and he's in control of the White House, and so he's painting the Democrats as, but, you know, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that Democrats are not the only evil in the government. So, and then there was the whole thing with Reagan and the Iran-Contra scandal, and, you know, I think if I stopped to explain everything and get into it, this would take months to get through. And it's interesting because I'm well read and well studied, and a lot of this stuff I've looked into previously. So anyway, let's go on to the next post. Next post occurs at 11:31 on October 31st. And Q says, "Get the popcorn. Friday and Saturday will deliver on the MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, promise. POTUS knows he must clean house, the government, in order to free up and demonstrate who has authority in order to pass important legislation. This was always the priority. Remember, Attorney General Sessions cannot look like an impartial player that is out to get all former Obama team players, as we need him for other important work. All will come into focus, and for anyone to think POTUS is not in control is kidding themselves. Also, he's 100% insulated with zero risk of impeachment. Fact." Well, it's interesting, but it frightens me in the fact that, okay, it's kind of like, remember McCarthyism, when everybody was a communist? You know, you would just go and if you wanted to destroy your enemy, you'd call them a communist. And this is what this reminds me of, except they're accusing these people of being Satanists and pedophiles. And indeed, some of them have proven to be. You know, I'm not saying that that's not a fact. I'm just saying it becomes very convenient to label others as that if they're your political enemies. And again, I come back to it. To me, it's doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Yes, I think all of that needs to be cleaned out. Definitely it needs to be cleaned out. But if it's to free up and demonstrate who has authority to pass important legislation, does that not make you a little worried? This was always the priority. I just think we need to look into that. I think we need to consider what happened in the days of McCarthy and how people were mislabeled. And, you know, anytime you wanted to get back at someone or to have them blackballed or whatever, you'd call them a communist. Well, I'm seeing this happening with pedophilia, and I know that pedophilia is rampant throughout Hollywood, throughout the government. It's obvious by the little things that have leaked out, and obviously by the emails that leaked, that some of these people are into Satanism, some of these people are into pedophilia. Some of these people are into things so dark, I don't even like to think about it. But again, as long as we're labeling, as long as we're getting the people that really deserve it and not just labeling people because they're our political enemies. And I don't mean our as in I'm not Republican and I'm not Democratic. I'm not either. I'm not for either party. So I'm not, I'm impartial. I can't vote for either one. So I am impartial in this matter. So this is interesting. This is a very interesting post. And let's go on to the next one. Okay. October 31st at 11:58 p.m. Why does Obama travel in advance of POTUS to foreign locations? Well, you know, at first I thought this was ridiculous, but it turns out it's true. And I just got a link here to, come on, try to bring this up here. Dang, I wonder if I have enough windows open. Okay, sorry. That's not where I wanted. Here. Obama horns in on Trump's foreign trip. Now, this is from the Washington Times. Former President Barack Obama will leap back onto the world stage Thursday to join German Chancellor Angela Merkel at a forum at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. But it's interesting because just a few miles away, President Trump was doing something that day. Mr. Trump is traveling around the Middle East and Europe, visiting Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Vatican City and Rome in an effort to unite three world religions. Oh, that's the first time I saw that, actually, and that's interesting. So Mr. Trump is traveling around the Middle East and Europe, visiting Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Vatican City in Rome in an effort to unite three world religions. Interesting. He will also attend a NATO meeting in Brussels and G7 summit in Sicily. The forum in Berlin returns Mr. Obama to the Brandenburg Gate, which has been the site of pivotal speeches throughout history, including President John F. Kennedy declaring whatever that is. It's interesting. Anyway, I did check on this, and it would appear that this is correct, that Obama is undermining. And let me see, here's another link. My computer is slower than a turtle. My other computer died, and I got a new computer that has less RAM, and I'm gonna have to up it because it's just too slow. Yeah, Trump and Obama are having very different trips to Europe, but they were definitely there at the same time. So those are just two links. I can put them in the comments down below. And here I've written that Barack Obama was the most traveled U.S. president in history and has traveled to 9 countries since leaving office. Interesting. Now, Q asks, why is this relevant? Well, he's obviously undermining Trump's efforts. I mean, that would be obvious to anyone. Focus on the power of POTUS as it relates to the Marines. And as I said, he can deploy the Marines without congressional approval. And obviously, he's telling us that he intends to use this power. I would assume. How can military intelligence be applied to prosecute bad actors and avoid corrupt agencies and judges? and I put intelligence what does that stand for again? I get all these things mixed up. SAPs protect the planning and execution of especially sensitive intelligence or CI units or operations, but it stands for something and I can't remember now. I hate that. Oh well. If I remember in a subsequent video, I'll come back to that briefly, but and Q also says biggest drop on poll, and poll is politically incorrect. It's the name of the forum on 4chan where he is dropping this information. And then he says above is the reason why the shills are sliding. I think we all know what a shill is. In case you didn't know, shills log and send new information back to ASF, and that's Army Special Forces, for instruction. They use a 5-prong prepackaged injection. One post auto-generates 4 more at random designated times. Common drive of posts they all tap into. Since they misjudge the influence of the mainstream media, they are aggressively looking to censor throughout major platforms in exchange for CIA slush funds and I would say that's worldwide, access for expansion of said networks. Everything they do has been forecasted and prepared for. So it's interesting because, you know, further along we're going to get into Snowden and all that stuff, but he's telling us that, you know, they log and send information back to the Army Special Services for instruction, and that there's a common drive of posts that they all tap into. And later on, he says for every one, I think, it auto-generates 4 more. So, I mean, we all know that there are shills, and in certain forums, when you start talking about certain informations, all of a sudden, people will, you know, be shilling. I don't know any other way to put it. It's obvious to anybody that spends time on the internet and spends time in any sort of forums or news forums or anything like that. I think it's obvious what shills do and who they are. So let's go back up to the next one. Now, this jumps to November 1st, and this is where it really starts getting into some of this information. Why did Mueller meet POTUS one day prior to the FBI announcement if Mueller could not be offered director due to previous term limits rule? Well, this is interesting because, Mueller couldn't be offered the FBI position, the head of FBI, because he'd already served his term and it had been extended for 2 years by Barack Obama. So there would really have been no reason for Mueller to meet the president one day prior to the announcement. And I put here, Robert Mueller is an American lawyer and civil servant who was the 6th director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation from 2001 to 2013. A Republican, he was appointed by George W. Bush, and his original 10-year term was given a 2-year extension by President Barack Obama, making him the longest-serving FBI director since J. Edgar Hoover. He is currently head of the Special Counsel investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 United States elections. So my answer to that was it's either to give him information, sensitive information, that he does not want to give him in the presence of anyone else, or it's about the Russia probe. I think that's pretty obvious, but that it would be one of those two things. Why is Pelosi begging for a new special counsel? Well, I think that that's obvious too, because Mueller is not under the control of the deep state. And I think we all know what deep state is and what it means. I'm hoping anyway. What is Pelosi's net worth? Well, interestingly enough, the House minority's minimum net worth is $29.3 million. How was this obtained given a salary as a career official? That's a good question, isn't it? How did she? And as we'll see, this is the case with many of the civil servants in the government at this level. They're all multi-millionaires. How is that possible? I don't know. I mean, her husband has invested in real estate, but I'm not sure. How is this obtained? Okay, why is Pelosi's memory going? Now, when I read this, I said, what? Like, I was not aware of any of this because I've been temporarily out of the United States and I just hadn't seen any of this. But I went to the internet, and yes, interestingly enough, she is having trouble with her memories, supposedly. She calls President Trump, President Bush. She gets the year mixed up. She gets all sorts of things mixed up. And it's not just little mistakes. I mean, we all do that. And if you're speaking, it's easy to get nervous and to forget something or to missay something. But we're not talking about that. Like, when you go and you really look at the videos, you can see something's wrong. And I didn't link to it here because it's just overwhelming how much information there is, and I didn't want this to get really, really bogged down. But it's interesting. I would encourage you to go to the internet and maybe to YouTube and download some of these videos and watch, because it's definite there's something wrong with her memory, or else she's putting it on, which is what Q is about to intimate, that she's putting it on. So the question is, why is Pelosi's memory going? I said it could help her if she has info on people but doesn't want to give it or doesn't want to testify. Could it protect against prosecution? And obviously that's what Q is getting at, because he next asks, could it protect her against prosecution? Well, absolutely it could. You can't prosecute somebody if they can't remember. How so? Well, she can claim that she forgot when questioned, or she forgets. She has no knowledge of it. Now, this is interesting as well. What if John M., and he's talking about John McCain, what if John M.'s surgery was fake? Now, he had a brain tumor, July 2017, the 80-year-old lawmaker has glioblastoma, an aggressive cancer, according to doctors at the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, where McCain had a blood clot removed from above his left eye last Friday. So this was in July, and Q is asking, why would this occur? Well, again, I think he's intimating that it was fake, because I said if it was fake, he could have faked it to prevent testifying, just like Pelosi. I suppose it's possible. What could this prevent, potentially? Well, testifying and answering questions or being prosecuted. You can't answer questions if you've had a brain tumor and can't remember. So it's interesting. It's an interesting premise. I don't know. What is the Mayo Clinic? Well, we all know what the Mayo Clinic is. Who sits on the board of directors there? Well, interestingly enough, it's Barbara Bush. So, what Q is saying, basically, not basically, this is what he's saying, that Pelosi is, or could be, or very likely is, faking these episodes of forgetfulness, and that John's surgery was faked to prevent him an out, and that it was helped, this ruse was assisted by Barbara Bush. That's essentially what he's saying. So we don't know, because we don't have proof of this. At this point, we have Q telling us that potentially telling us that this happened, but we have no actual proof of that. But it is interesting to think about, very, very interesting. And I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm saying that nobody knows, except a select few, probably. Now, let's go up to the next one. And in a few minutes, I'm going to take a break here because I have to get my clothes out of the dryer because I hate wrinkles. Okay, why do the Democrats want to control the black population? Well, it answers itself, really. Why do they intentionally keep them poor and in need? And I do believe that's so. I really do. They want to further enslave and control them by keeping them dependent. And why do Democrats project racism on a daily basis against the Republicans? Well, if you've ever read George Orwell's 1984, and if you haven't, I suggest you do, because it has never been more timely. I'm just finishing off. I've just got my thesis to finish, and I'll be finished my master's. And I just did an in-depth look at George Orwell's 1984, and I'm so glad I did, because the one thing this reminded me of that immediately, because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you know, in that book, they had to keep the people. They had to give the people an enemy, whether that enemy was real or not. And in that case, it was not. And they always had to whip them up into a frenzy against this enemy, keep them hating, because if they had an enemy, then they were dependent on the government to protect them from their enemies. And they always had to have somebody to hate. And it served the purpose of those in power, because it consumed them. It literally consumed them. It hating this enemy that didn't even exist. And the weird thing was in 1984, and I had to laugh, but it's so timely for today. It's like the enemy's face could change. You know, one day they could say, well, we're against this nation. And then the next day they turn it around. They say, no, we're friends with this nation now. Now this nation we're against. This is the enemy over here. And so you were always off balance, but you needed them to keep you safe, to tell you who your enemies were. And I really do think that there's an element of that going on with the Democrats and the black population. I really do. And it's sad because the black population has been, you know, they've given up one form of slavery and traded it in for another, but they're still being enslaved. They are still being enslaved, and I believe that with all my heart. I do not believe that they have ever been treated fairly in this country. But again, why do black elected officials do the crazy talk on behalf of Democrats? To get and stay in power. They're just, you know, telling the narrative that they've been told to tell. How do Democrats cover the historical fact of forming the Confederacy, KKK, and oppose all things pro-black regarding legislation? Well, it's interesting. How do they cover that? How do they? Well, because they control the narrative. They control the mainstream media. And if you control the media, you control the narrative. And again, that goes back to George Orwell's 1984. They controlled everything that those people saw, everything that every bit of information they got was controlled. And so that we are the same way. It's the same way. If you don't think that what we see and what we have access to is strictly controlled, you are deeply deceived. It is shaped by those that have a certain purpose in mind. They shape the narrative, and then they push the side of the story or the slant of the story that they want to push for their own purposes. And it's evident that happens. Oh, I could get into so many things right there. I really could, but I need to stay focused. What happens if the Democrats lose their slave grip on the black population? Well, again, I said it here, in essence, the black exchange one form of slavery for another. Maybe they could truly be free. I don't know. Why do the Democrats, through funding of the CIA, prop up and install Hollywood / media assets? Again, it's to control the narrative, and it's very strictly controlled. Very strictly controlled. Does this fall within Operation Mockingbird? Yes, it sure does. Oh, gosh. That just riles me up. If you don't know what Operation Mockingbird is, it was an alleged large-scale program of the United States Central Intelligence Agency that began in the early 1950s and attempted to manipulate news media for propaganda purposes. Gee, do you think that could be happening today? No. I mean, it's obvious. It's obvious that the news is manipulated for propaganda purposes. It's so obvious. And there's so many people that sit and they take whatever is being spoon-fed into them, and they won't even spend 5 or 10 minutes to actually look up and to see if what they're seeing is real. I don't know. It's frustrating. It's like, I remember when the whole Bin Laden thing, and they got rid of his body at sea. Yeah, right. And all of a sudden, it would have been, I don't know, midnight, and all these people gather in the streets in Washington, and there's great big floodlights on them, and they're carrying signs and posters. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, most of these people were babies when 9/11 happened. Seriously. And they're in college now, and they hear that it's like midnight, and they hear that Bin Laden has been, captured and whatever. And the first thought in their mind is to jump out of bed and grab a poster board, which they conveniently have, and write on that poster board and rush down into the pre-lit streets, and with a whole bunch of other people who had the same idea. And they all came together, and they were and yet it didn't happen anywhere else, only in Washington. Do you find that odd? I find that very, very odd. Let me go on, because I could tell you so many examples. What were the historical advantages the Democrats gained by having mainstream media and famous people peddling the narrative? Well, it kept their narrative as the only narrative. It's control and manipulation of the population. Who exposed, hang on here, oops, sorry, my antivirus is expired, like you care. Okay, who exposed the pedo network within Hollywood? And he goes on to tell us, I mean, there's no sense in us trying to guess that, because he says you can't answer the above, but we'll laugh once disclose details. So he's saying, once I disclose the details, you're going to laugh at who it is that exposed the network within Hollywood. Well, since we can't guess, and he's already told us we can't answer it, there's no sense in spending time on it. The network which controls this false narrative, which in turn keeps the black population under control, is being dismantled. False local and national black leaders will be exposed next as shills for the Democratic Party. Follow the money. Maxine W., who is Maxine Waters, has a $4 million home and cash assets in excess of $6 million. How is that possible? One example, and he's just saying this is just one example. How is it possible that civil servants are also wealthy? It's true. How is that possible? I mean, yes, I could see some of them, might be really fantastic investors or whatever, have real estate dealings, whatever, I don't know, but it is odd that they're also wealthy. All of these questions help to paint the full picture. So let's go up to the next one. It's getting really close to the time that I want to take a break, and maybe split this into two. I'll have to see. Okay. This was November 1st. Who did POTUS meet with yesterday? Well, he had a tax reform business meeting. And I've linked there to the president's schedule, which you can actually go and look up for yourself. It's common knowledge out there. You would just look up October 31st, president's schedule, and you can see who he met with. But it doesn't list each individual person, so I couldn't answer some of these questions because I just couldn't find the information, and it wasn't because I didn't dig. Okay, was Attorney General Sessions there? And I said maybe. And the reason I said maybe is because when I first was looking at this, I saw something under his schedule that stated that he was at the White House at 12:30. But when I went back and tried to verify it, it was no longer there. So I don't know if somebody took that down, and if they did, for what reason, but it did say that he was there at 12:30. And now I can't find that anywhere that states that he was at the White House on that day. So I don't know. Since I can't confirm it and can't prove it, I don't know. How many military intelligence generals were on the White House list to attend a separate meeting? Well, I can't find that information either. And if anybody does know, if they could put a comment down below, I'd appreciate it, because I would like to keep this sheet as updated as I can with correct answers, and I really don't want to be giving out incorrect answers if there is an answer out there. Could those meetings have been combined? Well, I said I assume not, because obviously if they could be combined, they would have been. You know, Trump's not an idiot. He would have combined them if they could have been. There must have been some reason why they couldn't have been combined, and I think he's going to hint at the reason why below. Why were certain rooms in the White House renovated? Well, I think that's quite obvious. It was to remove bugs and listening devices. Where was the meeting on Monday? It was in the Roosevelt Room, which happened to have been renovated. Why aren't phones allowed in this room? One of many. Because they could be used as recording devices. Not only that, but they're dang disruptive. Cell phones. Can't stand them. Why aren't phones allowed in this? Okay, we did that. What firm was contracted to conduct the renovations? Now this was very interesting. I didn't know this, and I was actually quite impressed with this. They used several Native American firms and women-owned businesses. The heating and air conditioning contractor was Calvary Mechanical Company, Inc., and the carpet contractor was Microbase, both of which are minority-owned small businesses. Now, I think there's a reason why he used small contractors. I think, you know, a couple reasons, really. It's an awesome thing to do. And secondly, the bigger the corporation that he got to come in and do that, the more chance it would have had to have been compromised in some way. I think he probably would have avoided whoever had been used in the past. That's just my feelings, but it's interesting. There were 3 rooms renovated, and one was the Oval Office, the Roosevelt Room, and the Cabinet Room, I believe. I did have a news article that said what had been renovated, so I know that that's correct, but I didn't link to the news article. But that can be easily looked up online. And it's interesting because the tax reform business meeting was held in the Roosevelt Room, and he had a later meeting with Paul Ryan, and that was held in the Oval Office, which again has been renovated, so is free of listening devices, I would imagine. And the meeting at 12:30, which was a luncheon, was held in the Cabinet Room, and that has not been renovated. So, I mean, yeah, it has not been renovated. So, Um, oh, okay. Yeah, the cabinet room has not been renovated. The Roosevelt room and the Oval Office has been Oh, see, I'm gonna have to go back. I'm confused now, but I know that I'm right on. The Oval Office is where he met with Paul Ryan, and he met with the tax reform business meeting in the Roosevelt room. And I know for a fact those two rooms are renovated. Now, the meeting, I know for a fact, was not, where the luncheon was held, was not renovated. I know that for a fact, but I may be mistaken on the name of that room, the one that was not renovated. So, I gotta just keep this straight in my own head. So that's that for November 1st. And here's another little one. Q says, I've dumped some crumbs like this over the weekend, which started the intense shilling. At this point, we are far enough along you can paint the picture without risk of jeopardizing the operation. Now, this might be, okay, this is an interesting one. We're going to get into some interesting things here, and I may take a break right after this, because I'm going to be getting into some really, really interesting things. Okay, who controls the National Guard? The governor of each state in times of peace, but the president can call them up for federal duty. I hate it when okay, call. So yeah, the governor of each state is in charge of the National Guard, but the president in times of can call on them for federal need, and call on them for natural disasters, civil unrest, or acts of domestic terrorism. So the next question Q asks is, why was the National Guard recently activated in select cities within the U.S.? Well, there was two reasons. There was natural disasters, and then there was the civil unrest, the riots. So they were deployed, and they've been deployed in several places, like Ferguson. They were deployed in Charlotte. I think they were deployed in Chicago. They went to Houston. I think they went to Florida. I don't know all the places, but those are just some of the recent ones. Can the National Guard work in coordination with the Marines? Why, yes, they can. I had to look that up as well. They not only can they, but they have in the past. And do conditions need to be satisfied to authorize? Yes, they do. And this yes is my yes. Okay. And there's been change to the legislation, but I'm just going to go on a little bit here, and then I will go to that. What former president used the military to save the republic, and what occurred exactly? And I would say that he is referring to Bush post 9/11. So now let's go up here where I'm going to show you, maybe I'm going to show you, come on. I don't know where the rest of it went. Oh, okay. Sometimes I'm getting tired because I am like so stupid that I just didn't even realize that was a link. So this goes into the change in legislation, and let me see, where is it down here that okay, previously come on, previously okay, it says under the US Constitution, each state's National Guard unit is controlled by the governor in time of peace, but can be called up for federal duty by the president. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 forbids U.S. troops from being deployed on American soil. Sorry, that's my clock. For law enforcement. So the Posse Comitatus Act, which most of us have heard of, prevents them from calling up from U.S. troops being deployed on American soil for law enforcement. The one exception is provided by the Insurrection Act of 1807, which lets the president use the military only for the purpose of putting down rebellions or enforcing constitutional rights if state authorities fail to do so. However, that was further changed, and if I can get to let me see, it says Congress has once again given itself power to change the Constitution by pure legislation, because they have changed what insurrection means to now include civil unrest, domestic terrorism, natural disasters, and I think that's it. So I thought I had linked to where it said that they had changed this. Oh, here it is. So what did Congress do to avoid this requirement? Because the requirement was that there had to be an act of insurrection. But it says, with the stroke of a pen, they changed the requirement of the Insurrection Act to include natural disaster, epidemic, or other serious public health emergency, terrorist attack, or incident. And, you know, this is asking, how does a natural disaster now qualify as an insurrection? Who determines, who determines what qualifies as a natural disaster? Will a snowstorm qualify for the president to control the guard and send troops into our cities? Will a heavy rain? And when will Congress use another stroke of the pen to add even more reasons to have the federal military control policing our cities? Like, this is pretty, to me, it's pretty alarming, because the Constitution says it, only for insurrection, but they now change the definition of insurrection. So I agree. What's to stop them from adding even more? Like, I don't know. Heat wave. It's a heat wave. Call out the troops. I don't know. Anyway, let me go back, because I'm sure you would like me to finish this tonight. I would like to finish it tonight. Okay, what former president used the military to save the Republic, and what occurred exactly? Well, I would say Bush post 9/11. But here it's interesting. I've got a link to, and I hate clicking on these links because they take forever to come up. It's irritating. Exceedingly irritating. Okay, this is 12 times the president called in the military domestically. So, desegregation of Little Rock School, integration of University of Mississippi, integration of the University of Alabama, integration of Alabama schools, Montgomery Civil Rights March, Detroit riots, Chicago riots following the assassination of Martin Luther King, Washington riots following King's murder, Baltimore riots following King's murder, New York City postal strike, looting after Hurricane Hugo, riots after Rodney King. So that's not, I'm not saying that is bad or good or whatever. I'm just saying those are 12 times that they have been called on by a president. And next he says, biggest drop to ever be provided on poll, 4chan's politically incorrect forum. Study and prepare. The masses tend to panic in such situations. No war, no civil unrest, clean and swift. The masses tend to panic in such situations. No war, no civil unrest, clean and swift. What is he saying here? What is he saying? Really? No war, no civil unrest, clean and swift. I think that I know what I think it means. And it scares me. It's not that I don't want those that are corrupt in the government removed. I do. It's just when you have one person with that much control, it's called totalitarianism. It's called fascism. That's what scares me. In regards to the Bush post 9/11, because he asked what former president used the military to save the republic. I said that would be Bush, but I'm not exactly sure if that's the right answer. And if someone has a better answer that's more fitting, again, please let me know, because I'm open, completely open. I want to keep this as correct as I can. Okay. I don't even know now why I use this. Presidents are typically... Okay, Commander-in-Chief powers post 9/11. The terrorist attacks of September 2001 created new complications for the separation of powers within the war powers sphere. After September 11th, the United States Congress passed the authorization for use of military force against terrorists. While this did not officially declare war, the legislation provided the president with more authority upon which to exercise his constitutional powers as commander-in-chief. As the U.S. Supreme Court explained in Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company versus Sawyer, presidential commander-in-chief powers increase when congressional intent supports the actions taken by the commander-in-chief. So the authorization for use of military force against terrorists served as that expression of congressional intent. So it's, President George W. Bush, his cabinet, and his military advisors determined that the Al-Qaeda terrorist network had financed and perpetrated the September 11th attacks. Okay. They also determined that the Taliban, a group in control of the Afghanistan government, had permitted Al-Qaeda to operate and train its members within Afghanistan's borders. Thus, the president used military force to invade the country in an effort to destroy the Al-Qaeda network. Gosh, I'm having a hard time talking. Network and topple the Taliban. During the conflict, the U.S. military rounded up alleged members of the Taliban and others fighting against U.S. forces. The military then placed these detainees. Interesting. This is the part why I linked this. The military then placed these detainees at a U.S. base located at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, at the direction of the Bush administration, which believed that the base fell outside of the jurisdiction of U.S. federal courts. Consequently, the Bush administration and military believed that the detainees could not avail themselves of habeas corpus and certain other protections guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. The military held many of these prisoners at the Guantanamo Bay for years without bringing formal charges against them. Prisoners obtained legal counsel in the U.S. to file habeas corpus petitions in U.S. federal court. A series of cases then came before the U.S. Supreme Court dealing with the constitutionality of the prisoners' detentions at Guantanamo. So, whether or not this relates to Q's question, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. I mean, we know that, but the refresher is interesting because I do think it's just a refresher to most of us. Okay. Now, okay. I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna go up to this one right here, and then I'm going to take a break, and I think I'm gonna cut this off and upload it and work on the second part after I've had a break, had a coffee, got my clothes out of the dryer, because ironing is not my friend. Okay, so this one, November 1st, 2017 at 1:11 a.m. Note, military intelligence has the same SAP, and SAP stands for, remember earlier I couldn't remember what it stands for. It stands for Special Access Programs. Special Access Programs. Military intelligence has the same special access programs as the NSA, CIA, etc., as designated post 9/11, which means they can all share intelligence. Why is this relevant? Because they can all share intelligence. Who can be held hostage and controlled? That's an interesting question, and I'm not exactly sure of the intent of that question. I'm not sure, and maybe it will become clear. I don't know. And then Q goes on to say, CIA thinks its foreign offshore assets are strong enough. And when they talk about assets, they're always talking about people. So they're saying the CIA thinks its foreign offshore people, the people that they have under their control, are strong enough to defend against the U.S. executive. And the executive would be the President of the United States and his immediate counsel, I guess. Not accounting for military use on domestic soil. Why does the Constitution explicitly grant this authority to the President, and what is it to prevent? Insurrection. And that, again, that should be in red. If I don't correct it now, I'll forget. They knew our agencies would grow in power so much so they can hold the executive hostage or engage with bad actors. Trump nominated someone new to direct every agency but one. He controls the top. Now, I did look this up, and every single agency did have a new director except for one, and that was the NSA, and that's headed by Admiral Michael Rogers. So what he is saying is that he controls the top. He's the one that controls the top. And I think, the whole asking us who can be held hostage or controlled, I'm not exactly sure what he's saying here. I know he's saying that they all share intelligence, that Admiral Michael Rogers is the head of NSA, and that he was the only one not replaced. So obviously he's trusted. Obviously Trump trusted this man, even though he's left over from a former administration. He obviously trusts him, and that he is the one that controls the information. At least I would assume that he's saying that he trusts Admiral Michael Rogers. I doubt he would keep him in place if he didn't. And then I go into over here what the special access programs are. Special access programs in the U.S. federal government are security protocols that provide highly classified information with safeguards and access restrictions that exceed those for regular collateral classified information. Two types of SAP exist, acknowledged and unacknowledged. The existence of an acknowledged SAP may be publicly disclosed, but the details of the program remain classified. An unacknowledged SAP, or USAP, is made known only to authorized persons, including members of the appropriate committees of the United States Congress. Waived SAPs are a subset of unacknowledged SAPs in the Department of Defense. These SAPs are exempt by statutory authority of the Secretary of Defense from most reporting requirements, and within the legislative branch, the only persons who are required to be informed of said SAPs are the chairpersons and ranking committee members of the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, House Appropriations Committee, and the House Armed Services Committee. Oftentimes, this notification is only oral. Now, I remember earlier on, there was somewhere, and it said, military intelligence SAP, and I didn't know what the significance of that was. And I'm just wondering, I think he's drawing attention to the fact that maybe Admirable, why do I keep saying Admirable? Admiral Michael Rogers is able to keep some of these SAPs from others within the agency that would be likely to misuse that information. I don't know. That's what I assume. But again, I'm open to anybody writing comments and saying, no, you missed it on this. This is what this means. Whatever. I totally open to that. So November 1st, 2017 at 1:27 a.m. Any persons making statements they will not be seeking re-election was put in submission. For the betterment of the country, not all will be prosecuted, and all will do as told. You will see more of this occur, not normal, yet disregarded, and even on the Democratic side. On the Democrat side. So, it sounds here, and I put that up here, I said it sounds like Trump is holding them hostage. For example, he'll let them escape prosecution if they do what they are told and don't seek re-election. Am I reading that properly? Because that's how I'm reading that. Because another place he said that 70% of the government would need to be prosecuted. Well, that's not even feasible. And the cost to our country would be astronomical. So I think that what he's saying, for the betterment of the country, not all will be prosecuted. And I would tend to agree. If it's as high as 70%, then I would agree that I don't see how it would be possible to prosecute that many people and not have it take an astronomical financial toll on the country. But he's saying all will do as told. And any persons making statements they will not be seeking re-election was put in submission. I don't know, because to me this can be read a couple ways, and I would be interested in anyone else's insight into this. I just don't know. But I think, well, okay. This next one I'm going to do, and then I'm going to break. Like, seriously, I'm going to break, because then I'm getting into some really heavy stuff that will take me being rested to get into. So here's the next post, and that is on November 1st, 2017. And it's at 1:34 a.m. and it says, follow up to last post. Return to comments regarding Pelosi and John McCain. Some of us refuse to say his last name for a reason. I'm really not sure what that means, but and I said his earlier comments were that both are having issues with memory. This all has meaning. Everything stated, big picture stuff. Few positions allow for this direct knowledge. And he says, proof to begin 11:3. And notice when this is posted, okay? This is posted November 1st. November 1st. And he says, proof to begin 11:3. Well, what happened on 11:3? That's the date that Podesta was indicted. But the post was written prior to the indictment. So obviously, this is somebody high up. And he's saying that it's big picture stuff. Few positions allow for this direct knowledge. He's right. So it's at this point, I thought it was probably someone, high up in his administration. But as time goes on, you'll realize that most people believe that it's actually him. And then he says, we all sincerely appreciate the work you do. Keep up the good fight. The flow of information is vital. God bless. So I'm going to end it there, and I'm going to do more, because I'd like to get through eventually all of the posts. can't keep up with this, but I'm going to end it there and just take a much needed break, and I am going to work on the second part. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one. If I can ever get this turned off.